Hello folks, Jason Chrisman here, JC's Bees. Today what we're going to do is we're going to take our new Ceracell Nuc feeder, the top hive feeder, and we're going to get it installed on a hive. Before we do that though, I'd like to move in a little closer, show you how the box is assembled. There was one thing that I demonstrated in the first video that I was a little wrong on. I'd like to point that out real quick. I'd also like to do a little bit of experimenting in this video. If you remember, the Nuc feeder has two containers. I'm going to put Cerp in one, and I'd like to try feeding dry pollen sub in the other. So it ought to be some pretty interesting results here time we get to the end of this video. So let's move in a little closer, take a look at the feeder, how it all went together, and then from there we'll get it placed on a colony. Okay, so like I said, there was one thing that I showed in my first video when I demonstrated how the box went together just by setting it together that I demonstrated wrong. And that was the position of this board here in the center. In my demonstration I showed it going up and down in the middle. That left a gap for bees to get around. You would not want that gap to be there. You want it to be completely closed off when both of these feeders are sitting down in there. The reason for this is with this design, you're able to fill these containers without actually opening the colony. Look, let's pretend. This is your inner cover. You take your top cover off, you set it to the side, you're going to go fill your bees. Normally when you feed your bees, you got to smoke the front of the entrance, put on all your bee apparel, take your hive tool. Still might need your hive tool, I guess, to pop the outer cover, but pop the cover off. No smoke required with this feeder. You're going to go in there. We're going to top these off. Sure, you're going to see your bees coming up and down here, coming down to get Cerp, but there is no physical way for them to leave the hive from this area. They have to go all the way down and go out the entrance. That's one advantage to a top hive feeder. Now, the nice thing about this feeder is when you have Cerp in here, pretend again for a minute. We're going to use our imagination, kids. Okay, you got Cerp in here. Naturally, you would like your hive to be at a little bit of an angle so rainwater would run off. Any condensation in the hive will run out the entrance. So we're going to pretend the entrance is on this end. Okay, so now as your Cerp drains down, it runs towards these entrances, or these feeder corners. And what that makes it accessible for the bees to do is to drink every bit of the Cerp. If your hives lean the other way, let's just pretend the corners are on this end. Okay, now they're not able to get the Cerp. After it gets down to a certain level, it's going to run away from these corners up on the back high side and run towards the front. At that point, it's not accessible for the bees anymore. I can see Ceracell has the corners in here for these to pop in, but in order for these to work all the way around, you would need this slit cut in all four corners. I think that would be a great advantage if Ceracell could go ahead and finish cutting these out and offer all 8 corners in the package instead of just 4. At the same time, you know, if you're going to use these for winter feeding for dry sugar, you set this on top of your hive, you take these out for dry sugar so the bees are able to get up in there. Okay, let's turn it back the way it was. You would have these ones popped out too. Just imagine they're popped out. As it warms up on a warm day, you know, it's winter, so it's not going to get too warm. But at any rate, when we get a fairly warm day, the bees will venture away from the cluster, come up through the corners, and come into the dry sugar. It just seems convenient to me that if they had corners in here too to get up through, here and here, you know, it just makes it easier for the bees to get up to the dry sugar, and it makes it easier for the bees to get from the dry sugar back to the cluster before the temperatures drop again. So I guess if Ceracell sees this, one thing I'd like to see them do is to finish the corners and include all 8 of the plastic corner covers. But that's how the box goes together. For my demonstration, like I said, I'm going to use pollen sub in one. I guess I could have left these out. And for the pollen sub, the bees are going to come up through the colony from the bottom and they're going to come up in here, and they're going to have access to get into here. So what I did is I've made a cover right here, and that's going to sit on top here, and this is going to be my inner cover for this side. I don't really necessarily need one on this side, but it'll help keep my outer cover level. So I did make one for this side. I labeled this one pollen sub so that I know, hey, when you open this one, you're going to have bees in your face. When you open this one, bees won't be able to get to your face because like I already mentioned, these corners prohibit that. Okay, let's go get this installed on a colony. Up until just a few minutes ago, when I was preparing for this video, this colony had this frame feeder in there. Because the frame feeder was in there, I had to remove a frame. So now I'm going to give them this frame, which has some drawn comb on this side and is basically just foundation on that side. I'm going to put the drawn comb towards the inside, and just like that, you've seen the very first advantage to a top hive feeder. You don't have to have this in your hive, and you're able to have all 5 frames in your box, or 10 frames, or however many your box takes. So you've got to keep an account that with this feeder in there, you had to remove a frame. And when you're preparing for winter, each frame is food. So it's very important. Okay, now we'll place this on the hive, like so. And the back department, we're going to put the pollen sub. And in the front compartment, we're going to stick Cerc. And I measured. Looks like you could get a half a gallon of Cerc in each container. So between the two, you could hold 1 gallon of Cerc. Just so you know, 1 gallon of Cerc fills about 1 deep frame time they get it down in the hive. So when you think, I've been feeding a lot, I gave them a gallon, you know, they got a lot more frames to fill. So give all this math some thinking when you think you're building up for winter and you think you fed enough. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to kind of fluff this around a little bit just to let them know it's here. I'm going to drop a little bit up here on the corners and let them sprinkle down on the bees, and I'm also going to do the same up here. I'm just going to remove this, let some Cerc run down on the bees. From there they'll figure it out. Do the same on this side. This has already got Cerc on it, so just let it run down on the bees over the edge. From there they'll figure it out. Okay, so now we place my one that I labeled pollen sub back here. The other one doesn't really need to be on, but it's going to help keep any robbing down. But by sticking this on there, that's going to stop all of that. There's not going to be any place for a bee to get in. And set the brick up here and we'll call it done. We'll come back a few hours, maybe a day, we'll see. A couple days ago we installed this Ceracell top hive feeder on my double nuc behind me, and I wanted to take a couple minutes and get in there and just see how it's working out. Let's go check it out. First thing I'd like to point out is I don't even have my veil on. You know why, don't you? It's a top hive feeder. I ain't even gonna see the bees up close and personal. No smoke, no veil. Pretty nice. Just come out and check the bees. Now, one thing I want to give a little disclaimer to, I do have an ant problem. We'll talk about that in a few minutes. Oh yeah, you can see the bees. Bees are drinking here. A couple bees drinking in there. Definitely got a lot of ants drowned, but not one bee. You can also notice that if you look at the side over there, you can see that the SERP slanted towards the front of the hive because I have my hive at an angle. And with it being placed that way, you can see how it's going to work naturally. As the SERP gets really low and fades away from this back wall and starts to work forward, the bees will be able to drink every bit of it. And most of your top hive feeders, it's not that way at all. Usually the place where the bees feed is right in the middle. The bees are able to drink it until it gets low, and then it fades away from their access point and they're no longer able to drink it. Not the case with the Ceracell feeder. Works very, very well. Pollen feeder and see if they've done anything with that. Oh yeah, got a couple bees in there. Got a few ants. Got a few dead bees. Maybe I need to throw some twigs or something in there. You can definitely see around the edge where they've been using their wings, and it's kind of created a little pollen dust storm. Now if you were to fill both of those up with SERP, you'd have a gallon. Just doing the one, I've only got a half gallon of SERP, but that's alright. We got a pretty good strong goldenrod flow right now, so I'm really surprised that there's even any bees in the pollen and that there's bees collecting SERP. But it's kind of cool this morning. Had a cold front move through last night after a shower, and that's probably why they're working it. Now back to what I wanted to say about the ants. You know, normally you would just place your standard nuc inner cover or your nuc lid right on top of here and you would call it done. If you remember back, I used separate lids because I didn't want these bees flying up in my face. So you don't have bees in your face when you remove that because they're not able to get out without going to the entrance of the hive and coming out. I think that if I would have picked a better board, and you can see right here on the end, it's cupped. So it's not really sitting flat right here, and the ants are able to go under that. So if you wanted to make an inner cover to keep the ants out of there, you'd want to make sure you have a nice flat board, a nice piece of flat plastic board, something completely flat. And then if you wanted to go one step further, what you could do is maybe heat you up a little wax, put your little bead around here, and then maybe push that down into it, or a little propolis. You know, you want to use something that the bees are making. That way you ain't got to worry about causing any problems. But there you go, folks. Ceracell top hive nuc feeder. So there you go, folks. You can see a drowned proof feeder right here made by Ceracell. You can also see a feeder that the bees are able to drink every last drop of SERP out of right here. Not any feeder on the market do I know of that's like that. Not any. So if you want to take your sugar and you want to dump it out on the ground and you want to waste your money, buy the others. If you want something that you're going to take your sugar and every last drop is going to end up down here in your bee colony, buy a Ceracell feeder. Now, there's nothing worse than buying a bunch of sugar, feeding it to the bees, and then finding out a couple of weeks later after you go back to check, see how food stores look, that they weren't able to access it all, and it all turned to mold, it all fermented. So you just threw all that money away. When I'm feeding these girls, I want to know they're getting their food. I want to know that their resources are building. And with this top hive feeder, I'm able to do that. Now, one thing I do want to stress, there's 3 different distributors that will be carrying this top hive feeder in the United States. At this point, I do not think they have them in stock. You know, we're going into fall. Give them till spring. Let Ceracell and these 3 distributors work things out, and hopefully by spring they'll have them in stock, they'll have all the kinks worked out, and you'll be able to purchase them. I had somebody in the unboxing video said they went to Ceracell's site and, you know, started to place an order. They got the shipping, it was going to be like $600 to send it here to the United States. You've seen that box of stuff that they sent me from Ceracell to right here, Central Ohio. I don't know exact prices, but I would imagine it costs a couple $100 at the very least just to send the box. That's just shipping. That's not counting the products in it. It's just to ship it to the United States, to Ohio. Kind of crazy, huh? So let Ceracell and the distributors work all those details out, how things are going to work. And hey, it may cost us a couple bucks extra in the end to get the better feeder. But if we want to have them here, Ceracell's got to make their money back. I mean, they're shipping all this stuff over here, so, you know, we've got to be willing to pay. So if it's something that's out of your budget, then it's not going to work for you. But at the same time, you can't say it's out of my budget. I'd rather go buy another top high feeder and then give them sugar that they're not going to be able to eat all of. So see the big picture. You know, years of buying sugar and making syrup, that's all going to add up. You could get your money back. So just something I wanted to point out there. I hope you liked the video, and if you do, you'll throw me a big thumbs up. If you haven't taken time to subscribe, please do so, and click on that little bell so you can get notified when I release new videos. Thanks for watching, folks. JC's Bees.